Obviously, it's very good news. So we've gotten dozens of Canadians across the Rafah crossing, but there are hundreds to get out. So we're going to continue to work day and night until all Canadians and their families are out of Gaza. This is a priority for this government. Évidemment, c'est des bonnes nouvelles qu'il y ait des douzaines de Canadiens, de familles canadiennes qui ont pu sortir par la porte Rafah, mais il y a beaucoup de travail encore à faire pour secourir tous les Canadiens, les centaines et leurs familles, et on va continuer de travailler tous les jours pour le faire.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, il y a beaucoup de rumeurs dans le monde des médias, c'était le cas à TVA encore la semaine dernière. Un, votre réaction, s'il vous plaît, et deux, est-ce que votre gouvernement songe à d'autres mesures pour freiner l'hémorragie?
On continue d'être là pour essayer de protéger les médias, de s'assurer qu'il y a des médias forts et indépendants qui soutiennent la démocratie au Canada et à travers le monde. C'est réellement inquiétant, mais c'est une des raisons pour laquelle on tient si fort contre les géants du Web qui ne veulent pas payer leur juste part aux journalistes qui font ce travail essentiel. On va continuer de le faire.
Est-ce que
en anglais? Bonjour tout le monde, merci pour être ici avec nous aujourd'hui. Alors, j'ai bonne nouvelle. Nous avons conclu une entente avec le Québec, la province de Québec, pour construire des logements après des discussions sur le fonds pour accélérer la construction de logements. La totalité des investissements provinciaux et fédéraux est 1,8 milliard de dollars. C'est une entente historique pour la province de Québec et pour le Canada aussi. C'est très important de reconnaître que Québec est la seule province qui égalait les investissements fédéraux pour construire beaucoup de logements. C'est une bonne chose, mais ce n'est pas juste le nombre de dollars. C'est très important de reconnaître aussi le nombre de logements. C'est incroyable parce que le gouvernement du Québec a dit en public les résultats incluant plus de 23 000 nouveaux unités de logement, incluant des investissements qui construisent des logements abordables, mais l'entente incluant des réformes pour les communautés aussi, qui augmentaient le nombre de logements pour toutes les provinces. C'est une bonne chose pour le Québec, c'est une bonne chose pour le Canada, et je vais dire merci à mon homologue, Ministre Trudeau, pour le leadership sur cet enjeu. C'est très important. Notre gouvernement a identifié la priorité commune avec les belles provinces, et nous travaillons ensemble pour compléter les négociations et pour avancer une entente très importante pour construire beaucoup de logements. Et Pablo, est-ce que vous avez des commentaires?
Oui, merci, Sean. Tout d'abord, je tiens à saluer le travail de mon collègue, Sean Fraser, également le travail du gouvernement du Québec. C'est un autre exemple où on peut collaborer ensemble, on peut bien travailler ensemble. Mon collègue l'a dit tantôt, le Québec est la seule province qui vient égaler les fonds, donc 900 milliards multipliés par 2, ça fait 1,8 milliards, ce qui est énorme. Donc, on travaille en fonction d'objectifs communs, de résultats communs, et c'est pour le grand bénéfice de toute la population du Québec, et on le fait au niveau du logement, on le fait également au niveau de la lutte à l'itinérance, au niveau des changements climatiques. On démontre clairement à travers le travail de Sean, de nos collègues ici, mais aussi du gouvernement du Québec, que lorsqu'on décide de travailler ensemble, c'est tous les Québécois et c'est tous les Canadiens qui en bénéficient.
Mr. Fraser, I'm sure you saw the communique from the premiers yesterday where they take issue. They don't want the Accelerator Fund going directly to municipalities. They want the money to flow through provinces, and they're concerned about that. What's your response?
My sense is if we're living through a housing crisis, and we are, we cannot take an effective tool off the table. What we've seen through the Housing Accelerator Fund throughout much of Canada over the course of the last number of weeks and months is real progress on issues that previously had languished for far too long. By engaging directly, by putting federal money on the table to incentivize a reduction in red tape at the municipal level, but also an increase in ambition when it comes to the speed of permitting and the way that communities allow homes to be built, we're making a real difference. We've got agreements with Halifax, Hamilton, Vaughan, Kelowna, and other cities across the country, and there are more to come, believe me, that are only waiting for an announcement. When we're actually seeing the federal government create incentives that is literally changing the way that cities build homes, there is no good reason for us to take our foot off the accelerator. We need to continue to move forward. We need to use every tool in our tool belt to get more homes built, and I'm going to continue to do that, and I'm going to do it as quickly as I possibly can.
Given that it's a file that involves provinces, when you're talking about housing and transit-oriented development, all that stuff, is it really worth irritating the provinces to get this policy through?
Well, in all honesty, I have a good working relationship with different provincial governments, with different provincial premiers, with my counterparts across different provinces. One of the things that I found a bit surprising was that I'd never heard these objections before it was uttered in a press conference yesterday. The reality is the people who live in provinces are the same people who live in Canada, and they want to see the federal government, the provincial government, and their local governments work together to get more homes built. If provincial governments want to come on board, as Quebec has as a result of this this agreement that we're sharing some news of today, by matching the funds, by implementing the kinds of reforms that we're pushing cities to, we would welcome that level of collaboration. But we're certainly not going to slow down if it's going to result in us taking longer to get homes built during a housing crisis. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and we're going to go as fast as we can.
What are mayors telling you about these provincial concerns?
That we should keep going. Mayors right now want to make some of the changes that we're trying to incentivize. Now, not every community is the exact same way, but there is yet to be a single community put their hand up and say, I don't want you to put federal money on the table to incentivize changes in my city. They don't want us to wait for other actors at the provincial level to come up and before we're able to actually help them make the kind of changes that they in many instances want to make. If provincial governments want to get on board, want to work with us by matching funding, want to get on board by implementing the kinds of reforms that we're now incentivizing at a city level across Canada, they are more than welcome to. I would welcome their participation, I would welcome their call, but there is no circumstance in which I am willing to slow down when it comes to building houses in this country in the middle of a housing crisis.
You've mentioned the fall update before. Are you still expecting to have housing announcements in that update?
I'm expecting you're going to continue to see housing measures leading up to, during, and after. I'm not going to wait for some magic date on the calendar to reveal the full details of everything that we're going to do on housing. Now, we are, as I've said before publicly, putting together the ingredients for a comprehensive plan that's going to address Canada's national housing crisis. But as policies are ready to go, we want to roll them out. Speed is everything right now. We are dealing with people who need homes who do not have one. We are dealing with a level of affordability that is simply putting housing out of reach for far too many. We need to go as fast as we can, and the minute that we have a policy ready for public consumption and for implementation, we're going to let it go. We're not going to wait for anything.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Okay, merci tout le monde.
Thanks a lot.
Wonderful to see you all. Thank you for being here. My name is Mike Morrice. I'm the MP for Kitchener Centre to share remarks on behalf of the Green Party of Canada in response to the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development's report from just this morning. The context being from the UN Secretary General. I'll read out his words. The global climate fight will be won or lost in this crucial decade on our watch. Now, the Commissioner's report this morning confirms that Canada remains the only country in the G7 whose emissions have gone up since 1990, which is the baseline used by international climate scientists. Now, not only are we not on track, but we know that our target is not that which the scientific community is calling for. And the Commissioner even makes clear that the assumptions behind the numbers that show us not on track are overly optimistic. And so we share the concerns of the Commissioner that this is getting repetitive, that time and again over successive governments of different party stripes, we seem to, as a federal government, have targets set and miss them every single time. Now, this is also all before our Parliament began this race to the bottom to erode carbon pricing, of course, which is not captured in the Commissioner's report this morning. We know that carbon pricing is the most economically efficient way to tackle the climate crisis, and the PBO confirms that 80% of Canadians receive more back in rebates than they pay in pricing, quite unlike when it comes to oil and gas companies' profits. Their profits went up 18 cents a litre in 2022 as compared to only 2 cents in a carbon tax. Not a single rebate to Canadians as oil and gas companies gouge us at the pumps. The good news is that, as the Commissioner says in his report today, solutions exist. The problem is that available solutions are being implemented much too slowly. In other words, it's about political will. But the good news is we have a window of opportunity still to act. As Greens, we continue to call for that which we always have. First, follow what the UN Secretary General has already said. His words, new fossil fuel infrastructure is moral and economic madness. We must cancel the Trans Mountain Pipeline and recognize the $30 billion that have been lost in building that pipeline and expanding that pipeline. We must end the subsidies to the oil and gas industry, put in place, as I've called for through Motion 92, a windfall profit tax on these excess profits of the very industry most responsible for the crisis we are in, get a cap on oil and gas emissions, strengthen clean electricity regulations as well as methane regulations, and do what Canadians need, offer them no-cost energy retrofits, which we could do if only we put that windfall profit tax in place. In short, the federal government needs to do the work, enough with the talk, and move on to the action. Thank you.
Why do you think the regulations are being delayed, especially with the oil and gas sector?
That'd be a better question for the Minister of Environment. What I'm going to continue to call for, and Elizabeth and the rest of the Green Party of Canada, is to ensure not only that we see the regulations move more quickly, but the quality and the stringency of the regulations matter. As it stands right now, the clean electricity regulations allow for provinces like Ontario to build new natural gas-powered electricity. This is exactly, as I said, what the UN Secretary General calls moral and economic madness. We need more stringent regulations, and we need them more quickly.
But is it a lack on the government's part of will to regulate the sector?
I'll let you speak to the government about what's happening for them. What I can say is that for Canadians who want to see action on climate, it's deeply disappointing to see really significant regulations continue to be delayed, and to see the draft regulations that have been put out. We know that they are insufficient, and so we need to see them move towards more stringent regulations and to move towards doing so more quickly.
Mr. Trudeau, he said that he wasn't considering the windfall tax in your motion proposed. Did you have any conversations with Liberals or anyone in the government about why they aren't pursuing that policy?
Well, not only have I had conversations, but in the media we've seen Liberal MPs who've come out in support. It is a very reasonable measure. If we just take a step back, this government already put in place a windfall profit tax on banks and life insurance companies. They called it the Canada Recovery Dividend. The sky didn't fall. and so what we're calling for, and we have colleagues in the Bloc, NDP, Greens, and Liberal MPs who are saying, isn't this a reasonable place to start? The oil and gas industry made profits of $38 billion, just the top 5 companies alone. And thanks to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, we know that the Canada Recovery Dividend, when applied to that industry, would bring in $4.2 billion a year. While Canadians are struggling in an affordability crisis and oil and gas companies are gouging us at the pumps, and we're in this last crucial decade, isn't this the most reasonable place to start? And so I'm going to continue to have those conversations with the minister, with colleagues from all parties. We're calling for it to be in the fall economic statement, and we're going to continue to make that push until we see that done.
Has the minister given you a specific reason why they're not pursuing the policy, despite all the benefits that you've just laid out?
As I've said in past conversations on this, I haven't heard a reason. I'd be curious if you have yet. For my part, I'm going to continue to make the case and to do so in a respectful way. We don't need to be attacking. We can be recognizing that Canadians are in an affordability crisis. Canadians want to see our government do more on climate, and Canadians are increasingly disappointed that they're getting gouged at the pumps. And a windfall profit tax is one reasonable measure to start to address all three. En français? On peut faire un peu en français. Je suis un peu lentement, mais sûrement, je peux essayer.
Mais en fait, je voudrais vous entendre justement sur les délais que le gouvernement a actuellement pour sévir contre les pétrolières. Est-ce que vous avez une explication, vous, pour ces délais? Pourquoi le gouvernement, à votre avis, n'agit pas plus rapidement?
Encore, comme j'ai dit à une autre collègue, c'est pas à moi pour offrir les excuses pour le gouvernement du Canada. C'est à moi, comme député de Kitchener Centre et à la Parti verte du Canada, pour mettre la pression pour les solutions raisonnables, concrètes que le gouvernement peut adopter demain et une taxe sur les profits excessifs de les compagnies pétrolières et gazières, c'est une option comme ça. Et je suis encouragé que mes collègues bloquistes, de les MPD et des collègues libéraux aussi ont déjà dit que c'est une raisonnable chose à faire et on va continuer à mettre la pression là-dessus.
Qu'actuellement, le débat qui est fait à la Chambre des communes sur la taxe carbone et son utilité, c'est un débat qui vous fait perdre du temps dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques?
C'est pas seul qu'on perd le temps, mais on parle pas de tout. Si on devrait être plus honnête avec les Canadiens. Quand on parle sur la taxe carbone, que premièrement, 80% des Canadiens reçoivent plus dans les rabais qu'ils payent dans la taxe carbone. Secondairement, que la taxe carbone a augmenté seulement 2 sous par litre dans 2022. Les profits de les compagnies gazières et pétrolières ont augmenté 18 sous par litre. Alors, si les politiciens seraient vraiment intéressés à mettre la pression sur l'abordabilité, ils devraient parler de ces profits excessifs et offrir les solutions à les Canadiens pour faire quelque chose là-dessus. Ouais.
Given that the NDP motion introduced today includes the windfall profits on oil and gas companies, are you in support of that?
Absolutely supportive. It doesn't matter. I'll support any party who provides, and the Green Party of Canada will continue to support any parliamentarian and any party that is being honest with Canadians about constructive solutions to move forward. And so while we were disappointed to see the NDP supporting a motion yesterday that eroded the price on pollution, we will absolutely, thrilled to see them take my motion and put it into theirs to have it voted on the floor of the House of Commons.
You know, the oil and gas companies, oil and gas industry comes out as a big villain in this, and it's a huge industry in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Like, what alternatives do they have for their economies?
Well, this is just it. When we think about workers in Alberta and Saskatchewan, we need to be thinking about prioritizing them as we do workers across the country. And if we were to get serious about addressing these excess profits and returning back those profits to Canadians across the country to focus on affordability measures, that is what we have been calling for, to bring Canadians together, recognizing that we need to do more to address affordability, to address climate, and to address these excess profits, which aren't going to average Canadians. They're going to the CEOs of the largest oil and gas companies in the country.
Did you see any positives in his report?
Well, even on EV uptake, this talk of trying to get to 80% of federal fleets by 2030, and I'm trying to look for something positive to share, and we're at 3%, and the commissioner is saying we're on track to get to 13%. And so it was as you heard from the commissioner, these are disappointing reports. I'm not saying that they've done nothing. Maybe the one thing I can say is that he again affirms that carbon pricing works. And we saw the Liberal Party stand up for carbon pricing again yesterday. Unfortunately, it's being used as a scapegoat by some politicians who aren't willing to talk about the subsidies, the over $20 billion going to the oil and gas industry. Those are taxpayer subsidies that are undermining measures that are working. And the commissioner did point that out, and I do appreciate the federal government for their commitment, if not for this carve-out from last week. And so there's a starting point of something positive. We gotta be honest with Canadians that carbon pricing is the most economically efficient way to tackle the climate crisis and needs complementary measures as opposed to eroding what we know works. Merci à vous tous. Thanks to all of you for being here. Appreciate you all. Merci. Thanks.